as I was sitting at the dinner with, I texted my brother. My brother and I were close, and telling him how nervous I am about this sermon, and this is my first sermon, and all this stuff. And my brother's like, well, you know, you can't go wrong with a shame-filled sermon. Just really give him the wrath of God. Like, really make him feel bad for being human.
Don't forget your brother's in love with
I was like, Richard, what kind of God do you worship? He's like, a Puritan one. Okay. All right. So, at least I got that straight away. So thank you so much for inviting me into this community the past 4 months. I moved here from Hawaii, and the past 4 months have been... like I said, I was living in Hawaii, where it was warm, and we were down by the beach in a low altitude, and then I come to Denver, where it's cold, and I can't breathe, and like, it's just a whole different world, and the one thing I had to like, get some power was like, well, at least with the dryness, my hair and my makeup will stay. That was my win. I would like really hang on to that win every day. But really, I came here and I was grieving, all these changes that come with a big move. I was living with a family and my boyfriend. My boyfriend goes off in the military. I leave this family behind. I come here and it's new weather, new city. I don't know anybody, and starting a new school and joining a new church. It was just so much hypervigilance and so much. It was just a lot. And I started grad school, and I get involved in this church, and I started, going to different events around Denver, and we're in this particular class. I'm taking Christian history, and I am bitter by seminary. I am so bitter by just all these classes, and none of them are practical. Like, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do if someone comes in to talk to me about their divorce, and I'm like, well, I can tell you all about the popes in the 1200s. I just, none of this, I didn't see how any of that was relevant. And so then we all are assigned our big final paper, and we have to pick an individual, an important Christian individual who comes after Jesus, post-Jesus, and how that intertwines with a social movement. And so it's the marriage of man or woman and movement, right? Like Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just pop out of nowhere. There was the civil rights movement coming, and there was a purge, just all God. And so I pick St. Francis, because I hear his prayer a lot. And ironically, Ms. Snodgrass did the St. Francis prayer on Sunday before communion. And when I first start learning about St. Francis, I think he's the most, I just think he's so annoying. I think everything he did was backwards. I was like, what do you mean you're going to go be a beggar and then turn around and then, chastise the church for being wealthy while then turning around and sticking your hand out and asking them to feed you? Like, that's bad. It didn't work. I thought he was annoying. I thought he was an extremist. I was like, oh man, when I'm stuck here, I just got to get the grade. And so, I was not open to the possibility of God surprising me. So there I am, hundreds of pages, hours and hours, highlighting and notes, and just going in all about St. Francis. And it's not just him. I have to talk about all about Italian papacy and the high medieval ages, and this thing that I thought was so boring wound up being fascinating. Like, it was just the coolest thing, and so with everything that I wanted to talk about. And so to set the stage a little bit, 1066, William the Conqueror and the Normans start taking over Europe, and they start coming all the way down and across Europe, and wind up kicking out the Muslims and the Byzantines from Italy, which they establish Christian rule, and they have it's all under a solid a unit of Christian and English Norman rule. And for the first time in hundreds of years, there is a trade route from England and France all the way through Italy and Greece and now into Turkey and to Southeast Asia, and we're talking money overnight, new money, so much money that it was corruptible, and it did. And Italy was right in the hot spot. They were the middlemen of all this new change and all this new money. And also, as we know, where's Rome? Italy. So we have the upper class getting more wealth than they've ever seen before. The church is getting more wealth. I mean, this is this is what turned the Dark Ages into the High Middle Ages, which led to the Renaissance. This is the game changer, these Normans. And who's right in the middle of it? Francesco de Bernardone, as we know as St. Francis. And so he grows up and he is a spoiled brat. I mean, this kid, he drops out of school, he disobeys curfew, he's sitting there like counting the slats on the wood at church. Like he's just that annoying, just rich little boy who has never wanted for anything in his life. He's drinking wine and fine living and the finest people, and his family is also proud, and they're running around in their nice aristocratic clothes, and you know, he's coming of age, and his father expects him to take over. He was a textile, a fabric cloth trader, and his father expects him to take over the clothing business and continue trade with his French connections all the way down to the Asian, and Francis is like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want this world. I'm bored of it. I've already spent the last 2 decades doing nothing but drinking it and eating it, and like there's nothing here. I want to be a medieval knight. I want to go into battle. Well, with all this wealth, there were city-states. It wasn't Italy as we know it today. It was like all these like giant city-states, and some of them followed the Holy Roman Emperor, and some of them followed the Pope, and they were always clashing over trade and religion, and he got his chance. 1202. He'll be a medieval knight. And back then, like I said, we don't have the same military government-funded thing that we do now. His family funded his farmer. And he grew up doing archery and wrestling and all these like structured, organized things. And this little rich kid gets to go live his dream as this noble medieval knight, and right off the bat gets caught. Like, he sees all of his friends die, it's a bloody battle, and the enemy, instead of killing him, even though he's a terrible soldier, because all he's done is like structured archery, he hasn't been in a chaos war, they see that he's wearing what would be considered, like, he was wearing Under Armour when everyone else was wearing like white wife beats and old socks and tennis shoes. Like, he stuck out like a sore thumb. They imprisoned him for ransom for a year, and they stuff him underground in a solitary cell. And they essentially torture this guy. Like, he doesn't see the light of day for a year until his father procures the funds to bring him out. He comes out, and if you thought he didn't like this world before, he's completely over it. I mean, he probably now has what we now would call PTSD, and depression, and a vitamin D deficiency, and all the illnesses that come with being underground and being solitary, just completely malnourished. And he's jaded. And he just doesn't want anything to do with anybody. He's going in a remote wilderness. He's just over it. And so he's like, you know, maybe there's no life. Maybe I'll go join another war. I'll just go die in battle. Like, there's nothing here for me. So he's riding away. He's going to go fight in another papal war. And he starts getting these visions. It's just like a lot, these episodes. And he gets this vision that's like, God tells him, wait, no. Don't do this. I have another way. You will be a knight for me in another way. He's like, all right. So he goes back, and like I said, he's hanging out like in the wilderness now. He's doing a lot of prayer and meditation. He's like I said, he's dissociated from society. And he's praying at this old ruins of this church, and he has this big moment, and God tells him, you will need to rebuild my church. And he takes this literally. Like, he's like, oh, okay. And so he goes into his dad's house, and he sells the horse, and he sells all their clothing products and their inventory, and he sells a bunch of stuff, and trying to make money so he can physically rebuild his church. And his dad is livid. Like, I mean, as you would. You just spent how many millions of whatever currency it was to bring your son home, only for him to be so jaded and despondent, and then to go in and steal your inventory and sell it. I mean, the dad was rightfully so. And so he brought him into civil authorities in front of the bishop and everybody. And he's like, I don't know what to do with my son. He just sold all my inventory, and I'm done. I'm over it. And it was right then that he just, after, like I said, he had all these episodes. He had the vision on the horse and the knighthood thing and the church. And this was his final conversion. He was like, I'm done. I renounce this world. I renounce my family name. You are not my father. He is my father. I'm done. Strips off his clothing and runs away into the remote wilderness. Gone. This becomes like some heroic. Some people go, he's mad, man. He's absolutely nuts. Like, have you heard about this? He had a psychotic break. Other people are like, no, I really think he's having a spiritual awakening. Like, he's been touched. And like it becomes this big controversy, and trade routes at the time were what like the internet and Facebook are to us. Like information travels fast on these routes. So suddenly, even before St. Francis became St. Francis, his name was spreading through Europe because of this wild streak at the government building. And so he goes off and quickly procures some followers, and that was his whole thing. He was like. And he walked around, and it was called Vita Apostolica, and which meant to imitate Christ. I will walk barefoot, I will own nothing, I will just walk around preaching just as Jesus did. I will imitate him to the teeth. And so that's what he does. And like I said, he gathers his followers, and then women get involved, and there's a new order called the Poor Clares, and that's the female one, and he has the French Friars Minor. Little brothers. And this is what I think is really cool about St. Francis. And I've been saying this for a while. He knew how to speak both languages. Because he did this voluntary impoverishing, he could understand this whole world. He also knew this wealthy world. He knew the wealthy church. He grew up in it. And so when it comes time for Pope Innocent III, he was hands down the most influential, most powerful pope, arguably, of all time. I mean, he established, just try to take my word on it, he's powerful. He calls him for it, and this is the same pope and a lineage of popes who have been kicking out anybody else who would not follow the church. They would kill him, they'd excommunicate him. It was not good to rebel against the church. And so St. Francis, is not saying it, comes in and explains to Pope Innocent III exactly what he's about. And St. Francis was very, very clear that this is not anti-church, this is not anti-pope, this is not anti-Rome, this is not anti-anything, this is pro-Jesus. This is pro-love, this is pro-compassion, this is pro-humility. And so he's like, okay, and all right, I officially approve. You get the papal seal of approval. And things took off after that. Absolutely took off. And St. Francis went on, and he was this hippie. He led a social movement without even meaning to. Suddenly people, because he wasn't so antagonistic and made the church the enemy, and he was like, no, I want to work with you guys. It's the wealth that has corrupted us. It is the power that has corrupted us. It's not, it's not the church. It's not the people. It's these vile, I don't want to call them principles, but these vile, corrupt human things over money and power. And so it becomes this whole movement, and like I said, it wasn't this side or this side. It was like, how do we meet back in the middle to perpetuate and to bring back, or resurrect rather, God and Jesus and the message, because we've lost that. We have lost that in all our money and power. And I think that's really important, because when the church jaded him so much, and when human nature jaded Francis so much, he learned that it was not an issue with God, that it was an issue with the humanness that we are, our sinful nature. He found that it was not reliance upon the church, but it was reliance upon God. That is where the safety is. For me, I get real messed up, right? Because I am a product of 2 divorced parents, and I get real weird with my human attachments, and when things get shaky, I get angry right off the bat. But as I know, anger is just my first wall of fear. Right? Just terrified. feeling unsafe, feeling insecure, feeling like, oh no, where is the stability? But that's what Jesus is about. That's what St. Francis is about. It's about not putting our reliance on humans, but putting our reliance on God. That is where the power lies.